scripting language. What is a front-end scripting language that we know? Wrong! HTML and CSS are not scripting languages.
JavaScript.
JavaScript is a front-end scripting language. Is JavaScript a back-end scripting language?
No.
Actually, technically now it is with Node.js. Node.js has turned JavaScript into a back-end language, but we're not learning about that this semester. Okay? If anyone ever asks you, JavaScript is actually one of the most versatile, universal languages that exists. It's actually really kind of amazing, and anybody who says anything different, you punch them in the eye. But PHP is a back-end or server-side scripting language. Okay? JavaScript is generally a front-end or client-side scripting language. That means that the client can see the language. They can see the code. But PHP is server-side. And what that means is that the client never sees the code. And that means we can write PHP code that does things that the client never knows about. That they never see, they can't change, they can't edit, they can't alter, they can't understand. And what that means is that generally speaking, with PHP, we can write something that is quote-unquote secure. Because JavaScript, you can see the JavaScript. You can go into the console, and you can go into the sources, and you can see the JavaScript. And you can go into the console, and you can fuck with the front end, right? You can just change things in the console. And that could be good, or that could be bad. But you can't do that with PHP. And if there's anything you need to write where the user can't mess with it, it gets written in PHP, or some other server-side scripting language, okay? And that's the reason that we're going to learn this, because a lot of the stuff that we're going to do today, you're going to think to yourself, well, didn't we just do that with JavaScript? The answer is yes. But now we can do it without the user being able to know about it, understand it, or edit it, or change it, or alter it, or fuck it up. Now, since PHP is something that runs on the server side, that means it runs before it comes to the browser side. That means it runs before it gets sent to the user. And what that means is that PHP is not an interactive programming language. JavaScript is able to handle clicks and mouse moves and things and button presses, right? PHP has none of that. There are no events in PHP, generally speaking, because there are no clicks, because it's not in a browser. It runs on server. It's a server scripting language as opposed to a browser-side scripting language. Okay? And so, whenever you're thinking to yourself, why would I do this over this? It's because you wanted to do something over in the other space. What are some things that PHP can do that JavaScript can't do? Well, JavaScript is able to have user interactions. It's able to handle front-end events. But it is not able to access databases directly, and it's not able to edit files on the server. JavaScript isn't able to edit files on the server, and that's good. JavaScript isn't technically able to edit files on the computer, and that's good. Because imagine you browse to a website and it just starts deleting all your files. Is that good? Imagine a user goes to your website and they start deleting all your server files. Aha! That's bad. But with PHP, PHP has access to the server side. And that means it has access to make files, delete files, change files, alter files, access databases, alter databases, and do other kinds of things like that. Sometimes JavaScript is not allowed to read a file, but oftentimes PHP is able to read a file from a separate source or something like that. Sometimes, when you're programming, it can be useful to offload programming onto the client side so that your server is lightened in its load. But sometimes you can't trust the client side is either good or smart or powerful, and so you can do calculations on your side because you know that they will get done. And so, generally speaking, there are reasons to ever write code on the server side or the client side, but you just need to understand the basic concept. Okay? PHP is a server-side language. That means it happens before it goes to the browser, and that means that it is more or less secure, and that means that it has access to files and access to databases, and that's why we use it. It's also open source. It's free, open source, and available, and part of something called the AMP stack. AMP, AMP stack. The AMP stack is Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Apache, MySQL, PHP. It's possible that if you go on the internet and search AMP, you'll find something for this thing that Google made called AMP, which is not what we're talking about. But if you search for AMP stack, then you will find information on an AMP stack. Now, there is one more step of an AMP stack, and usually that involves the operating system. So for instance, there is MAMP, which is Mac, Apache MySQL, PHP. There is LAMP, which is Linux. There is WAMP, which is Windows, and other such softwares. There's also server software called AMPPS and server software called XAMPP. And what's interesting about XAMPP and AMPPS is that AMPPS is a very good software that you can install on most computers and put server software on your own laptop. However, if you just updated to Catalina, Catalina made it so that you can't install any 32-bit programs on your Macs anymore, and AMPPS is still 32-bit. But there's another software called XAMPP, and if you wanted to install server software on your computer so that you could access your server software without having to connect to your server, you wanted to work locally because maybe you don't have the internet, or maybe you just want to work locally and you don't want to deal with the internet, you can install software. I'm not going to tell you how. I'm not going to help you if you have any problems. But it is something that you can look into and you can do if you can figure it out. There are problems with this. For instance, server configurations between your local server and your server might be different. MySQL settings might be different and all that kind of stuff, which can create code problems. But generally speaking, there are software out there for server software, and the server stack that we use is called AMP, Apache MySQL PHP. We'll be learning about MySQL later on in the semester. We aren't going to do very much with Apache itself. Apache is basically the software that routes files around. When you go to a server and you go to a folder and you don't type in index.html, but you still get the index.html, that's Apache doing that. Apache is opening up a folder. Apache is then checking to see what file you're trying to open up in the folder, and if you're not trying to open up in a folder, it has a bunch of default files that it can look for on the server and then send to you to open up a file. Okay? And so it is not necessarily necessary for any of you to find out too much more about server software or Apache or anything like that. We are, however, going to be learning about PHP, and it's important to just kind of know the environment you're in, right? I feel like all of you should be able to make folders outside of the desktop on your computer. And that's why we learn to make folders outside of the desktop, so you can kind of know the environment that you're in. And that's kind of the same reason that I'm talking about all of this, okay? In a general sense, you should know about the environment you're in. And on your servers are probably an AMP server, and that means you have Apache, MySQL, PHP. And the reason is because all those softwares are open source. Does anyone want to ask me a question right now? Yes?
Okay. Could you please repeat the software name?
So AMP stands for Apache, MySQL, and PHP.
No.
Oh, the softwares?
Yeah.
Like for server software?
Yeah.
So there are a number of different softwares you can get for your computer. Most of them just deal with the operating system name. For instance, LAMP, WAMP, or MAMP. So MAMP would be the Mac AMP software. So if you search for MAMP, you'll find MAMP software. However, I don't actually even know if that'll work right now. But then there are other softwares which are more platform independent. For instance, AMPPS, although it won't work on Catalina, the newest version of Mac. And XAMPP, which will work on Catalina. XAMPP. AMPPS or XAMPP. And remember, I will not fucking help you with that. If you would like to try to set that up, it can help a lot. It can also help you if you have bad internet or something like that to be able to run software on your server. Which brings us to an important point. For the rest of the semester, all of our code must be run from a server. PHP has to be run from server software. And that means that we have to be running it from our website. No more running anything from the desktop. If any of you were still opening files from the desktop, that will not work anymore. You must upload your files to your server and then open your website to run those files, because PHP does not run from the desktop. It only runs from server software. And that means it does have to be inside of your server and run from the browser. It's important that you understand that right now, or you'll be very confused when nothing works. If I have to walk around to somebody's computer and I see that they have a file //file opened, and that's their PHP files, I will be so upset. Because I'm telling you right now, none of your files will work from the desktop anymore. Everything you work on for the rest of the semester must be uploaded to your server. Okay? So, why do I have no signal? What's going on here? What's going on? Oh. It's going? It's going? Hello? Hello? Hello. Uh-oh. Fucking hell. This thing just keeps sliding. Ah! That's weird. Why is it not zoomed out? There we go. Luckily, I have a Samsung TV at home, and I know how to fix that. All right. Cool. So, what do we need to do today? Well, we need to learn about PHP, and so you guys are going to want to take really great notes today. And periodically, I might change some of my code. So if I ever change something, just comment something out that I've changed and keep moving forward with the changes that, like, duplicate and comment out to keep moving forward as you go along. You guys, periodically today, we will be checking to make sure that our code is up to date. But if you get behind, start taking notes, and then we'll catch back up at the mid section of the day. But also, try to be typing along. Try to be typing along while we're going along, because it's important to understand some of the stuff that happens in PHP as you're typing. And one of the things that's important that we'll do today is constantly talk about how to do something in PHP that might be different than we did in JavaScript. So generally speaking, we'll be talking about how PHP is different than JavaScript as we go through the day. Okay, so let's go ahead. And I'm going to make a module 8 folder. And inside of the module 8 demo folder, I'm going to make a new file, and that new file is going to be called learningphp.php. Learningphp.php. Do you want to flip around so you can see the screen, maybe? What? Am I not connected to the internet? What the fuck did someone do back here? Shit. There we go. Okay. So, alright, so we got our learning php.php. Just make sure you go to the right page. It won't be the index at this point. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to write some PHP. Now, it's important to understand something about PHP. PHP is written essentially like an HTML tag, except a unique, sort of interesting HTML tag that looks like this. What's also interesting about PHP is that PHP is written in single blocks. And what that means is that there isn't actually an opening and closing tag. There is simply this space right here where PHP is written and run. And what we're now going to do is we're going to learn how to find out information about our PHP version. And so what we're going to do is we're going to write a function called PHP info. And we're going to invoke or call that function. PHP info is a built-in PHP function that will only run if PHP is actually running on your server. So basically, this is a way of testing two things. Is PHP installed and running correctly on your server? And what version is it? And we'll find that out once we run this. So let's save. And let's refresh. And we should see something like, wow, boom, all this. So, what version of PHP are you running? Go find out right now. Upload this to your server. Tell me what version of PHP you're running. Anyone lower than 7.2? Upload it to your server and then open it up in the browser. Come on, you guys. We've been doing this all semester long, and if you haven't been, now is the time to figure it out. Learning underscore php dot php. Learning underscore php. There you go. That didn't work. Why didn't that work? It's because we're in the demo. There it is. That's the demo folder. And then learning underscore php dot php, you guys. Come on. No, you didn't open yours. You opened mine. Open yours. I didn't say it. That's better. If you are dragging and dropping to upload your files, you need to figure that shit out real quick, because that's going to get old. So you have to be uploading your files. to your server. So you need to figure out a faster, better, more efficient way of uploading your files, okay? And you need to figure out how to upload your files right now. This is it. We got to do it. You got to be able to access your files, okay? So, once we have uploaded a file onto our server, we can open that file as if it was, you know, an HTML file, and then we can see some interesting things. For instance, I can see that my PHP version is 7.2.3. And generally speaking, all of you should be on PHP 7 at least. Is anyone on PHP 5? Anyone on PHP 5? Okay, that's good. PHP 7 is the current version, and we want to be on that. That means we'll have access to all kinds of good stuff that we're going to learn this semester. And if anyone was on, I think, like there was an initiative that went around the internet earlier this year that basically upgraded everybody because PHP 5 got deprecated out of being helped by PHP. So everybody basically had an initiative to upgrade everybody to PHP 7. So this is PHP code. We are running PHP code. So we have a PHP block of code right here, okay, where we can write PHP code. What's important to understand about PHP is that, in essence, it's just an HTML file, which means that if we were to move this code into the middle of a regular HTML code and say this is my PHP info, we could do that. We could basically write PHP as if it was a tag inside of other HTML. My PHP info. This is my web page. I've designed it and labeled it, and now this code has gone into the middle of it. So, what you should know is that PHP files are, at their core, just HTML files. PHP is called a hypertext preprocessor, which is the word that we all looked up and found earlier and had a hard time pronouncing. A PHP hypertext preprocessor. Where have we heard the term hypertext before? No, don't. HTML. Anywhere else? HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, the way we access website domains. Hypertext basically means cool text, or more than text. Hyper means above, hypo means below. And so it basically just means neato text. That's what hypertext means. Or, you know, web page text, links, stuff like that, dynamic text. What's a preprocessor? Well, a preprocessor is going to be something that runs code to create something else. There are CSS preprocessors out there like Sass and Less, which run code that output CSS. They pre-process and output to CSS. PHP is a hypertext preprocessor, which means it basically is a scripting language that creates HTML. And that's what you need to know about PHP. It can do more, but for our intents and purposes in this class, what we need to know is that PHP makes HTML. And so PHP files are HTML files. They just also have the ability to run PHP code. HTML files can't inherently run PHP code, but PHP files are HTML files. You guys, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. Right? Is a square a rectangle? Yes. Are all rectangles squares? No. Same way here. All PHP files are HTML, but not all HTML files can run PHP. Okay? So. Yes? What's wrong?
I don't know. I write it wrong and I want to delete it and then.
You can't delete it? That was very easy. Why was that hard for you?
It's not
每个人的不一样，因为你的 update 是不一样的，就是每个人的那个会不一样。
Whenever you move
虚拟系统，我的是应该是最新的，我32句吧。
什么系统？
33，因为我好像
If you had any code.
才 update 的，就是你系统，好像就是你系统 update 的
You
话，
had
它就
made a
兼容
file
的东西
called
不一样。
dash. You had linked a file called underscore. I now made a file underscore.
看什么问题呢？
Okay,
能运行。
let's comment out that PHP info. We don't actually need it right now. We need to learn about PHP. And in learning about PHP, we're basically going to do a whole bunch of review of programming in general. Okay, so kind of generally speaking, we're just going to be doing programming review. So let's go ahead and echo out the very first thing that all programmers learn to echo out or print out or say. This is going to make you actual programmers. Are you ready? Hello world. It's the thing that all programmers learn to do first. Refresh, you should see hello world. You guys, I love what's called the Socratic method, which means that if you ask the right questions, people can figure things out. And I also like to teach simply by doing and inferring. Can you guys guess what echo does? Yes, you can guess what echo does. What does echo do? Guess. What does echo do?
Title. Title.
What does echo do? Yeah. See, that was easy. It prints it out. We'll use the term print. It prints it out. It prints it out to the screen. Okay, so echo takes a string. We know that's a string. We remember JavaScript. Echo takes a string and then prints it out to the screen. Okay, so it prints it out to the HTML. That's what echo does. Okay, let's talk about variables for a second. Because variables are going to be kind of interesting. So let's make a comment called variables. And you'll notice that I've done two different kinds of comments here because PHP has two different kinds of comments like JavaScript does. The exact same kind of comments. We have a single line comment and we have a streaming comment. Normally in Sublime Text, if you do command and the /, it will do a single line comment. So command plus /, will do a single line comment. Okay? If you do command option /, that will give you a streaming comment around any content that you have. Okay? So, variables. A equals 5. Let's break this down. When you were in 601, you learned about a concept called jQuery. And when we learned about jQuery, we learned that the dollar symbol means jQuery, right? That's not the way it is with PHP. PHP, there is no jQuery, so that's not what the dollar means. In PHP, all variables have a dollar symbol in front of them. All variables. So all stored data has a dollar symbol in front of it, except for a concept called constants, which we are not going to be anymore. For our intents and purposes, all variables have a dollar symbol in front of them. So A is the name of that variable. It is the variable A. Okay? The equals symbol, in this case, is the assignment operator. It is the assignment operator. We are assigning a value of 5 to A. So the equals symbol is the assignment operator. We are assigning the value of 5 to A. 5 is a value. It's actually it's what's called a literal value. It is literally the number 5. It's not a variable of number 5. It's not anything else. It's not a representation of number 5. It's not the string of number 5. It is literally the number 5. So it is known as a number literal. And we are assigning the literal value of 5 to the variable value of A. And then a semicolon indicates the end of a statement. And you guys, in PHP, semicolons are required in between statements. For instance, let's go ahead and remove that semicolon and say B equals 15. And let's save, and let's refresh. And you should see something like this. I want you all to do it right now. You will not probably see that. What you will probably see is a 500 error on your server. If you get a page isn't working 500 error, you are at the right place and a bad place. I need all of you to get a page isn't working 500 error right now. Oh, what happened to the screen? God damn it. What the fuck just happened? What is going on? Ugh. Come on.
Nothing? You see my page is not working?
Are you kidding me? Oh my God. There we go. Sorry about that. I need all of you to get a 500 error or a PHP error. One or the other. Everybody got the error?
Yes.
Everybody get it? No? So you say it, you upload it. No, yeah, you got it. That's 500 error. Go back. Yeah, 500 error. Did you get it?
No, 你没有那个。
You got 500 error. You couldn't find your file, so you need to find your file. You need to upload it to your server. I don't think you did it right. Let me see. You guys, okay, when you're in Sublime Text, we have learned that when you are in Sublime Text, you want to open up a folder. You do not want to open up a file in Sublime Text.
我建议把这上面的一些这个给擦掉，就 HTML 的代码。
不用擦掉，它是正确的。应该按理说你会有一个那个出来的。
对，我是出来了。
Upload. It is uploading to m08 yours_1. There you go. There's your file.
你没有加 demo，
Help her.
没有加 demo。
What's up?
Is mine right?
Yours is right. It's right in its wrongness. What's up? That's what you got. That's right. That's a 500 error. That's what you want. It says error 500. Look, read it. It says error 500. Does it say error 400?
500.
It says 500. Good. That's what we want.
I didn't type anything.
Well, you also have a space between PHP and the question mark. Okay, you guys. We have a problem. And the problem is you guys can't see PHP errors. She can for some reason. Or are you on my page?
Oh no, it's my page.
She can see errors. None of the rest of you can. And so what we need to do is we need to figure out how to show your errors. Is everybody on GoDaddy? Is anyone not on GoDaddy? You? Okay. We're gonna all gather around a person who is going to log into GoDaddy, and they're going to do this. We're going to learn how to do it from one person's thing, and then you guys are going to try and figure out how to do it on yours. Okay? But we're going to try and turn on PHP errors from our control panel. And so what I want somebody to do, anyone who wants to, is anyone who's seeing the 500 error. Can we do it from yours? Can you sign into GoDaddy?
I'm not using GoDaddy.
Who are you? You using GoDaddy? Can you sign into GoDaddy for me?
I'm already signed in.
Yeah, but you're in the wrong place, and you already have yours set up.
Why? I have GoDaddy.
I know, but you've already got your thing set up. I would need somebody with a 500 error to do it. You don't have the 500 error.
I have GoDaddy.
Wait, you were just seeing the PHP error.
No, this is yours.
Oh! Either way. Here, we'll do it here. Everybody, I need you to, if you're on GoDaddy and you got the 500 error, I need you to gather around here. It's fine. So, what we need to do is we need to go, which one of these is your site? That one? We need to go to our web hosting. And by the way, if you can't see, just get someone else to see and have them help you once you figured it out, okay? You're going to go to Manage Your Web Hosting. And then you're going to, no matter whose server you're on, you're going to try and find your way to a cPanel or a whole bunch of commands, okay? You're going to try and find your way to what's called cPanel. So what we did was we did Manage Hosting, and then we clicked the cPanel link, and we get to a page like this. You want to find your way to a page like this because in here are a whole bunch of options for you. And one of the options, if we scroll through here, is going to be a section like this. There's going to be a whole bunch of PHP things, and we want hopefully something that says select PHP version. Okay, select PHP version is what we're looking for. When we click into that, and this has changed from time to time, so sometimes this looks one way and sometimes this looks another way. Inside of here, there should be an option that says switch to PHP options. Something up here should say PHP options or something like that, okay? Sometimes it's different depending on the version or the software or whatever, but something up here should say switch to PHP options. So we've got manage hosting, we've got cPanel or control panel, then we've got PHP options, and then we've got, or switch PHP version, and then switch to PHP options. And from here, what we should be able to do is simply say display errors. Turn on display errors, and then that has changed this, and now when we come back over here, we should see PHP errors. Okay? It was a simple set of steps, but it was like 5 of them. So all of you need to try to figure out how to do that on your server. So it was go manage your hosting, go to your cPanel or control panel, or simply find your way into something that looks like that cPanel of options. Somewhere in there should be PHP version or PHP options or something like that. Something about PHP version or PHP options. And then inside of that page, there should be a link that says, hopefully, PHP options. And then inside of there, there should be an option for changing your version. So, you have some sort of options. We've got PHP. Okay, so you have 2 things here. And I'm going to bet it's actually this one. You might also find a thing called multi-PHP INI editor on Bluehost or multi-PHP manager. One of those things might have it. Okay, so this is switching versions, so I don't want that. What we want is this multi-PHP INI editor. That's going to be the right one. So we're going to come in here and we're going to see which one we want. This one? And then there we've got the display errors. There it is. And then we're just going to apply. And now yours should have the errors if you give yourself a time. What's that? So, cPanel. Yours is the exact same thing as the example we did. What's up?
I found my version.
It's low. It's fine. It's not too low. It's low. See if you can upgrade your server. Like, call up your server and say, can I upgrade to PHP 7? How do I change to PHP 7? Call up your host and ask them. Your host? Is it GoDaddy? Okay, you should call up GoDaddy. They'll have numbers. And say, hi, I have a host. I'm hosting a website with you. How do I change my PHP version to 7? cPanel. And then, so you're going to find something about PHP. So you're looking for, no, not PHP MyAdmin. It was something called like PHP version or PHP options. I think it might be. And then on that page, there was the switch to PHP options up in the top right. I said I think it might be. Try it. And then it was display errors. Nope. Yeah. Then options. There we go. So on yours, I think you've got the same thing as sheet over there, so you have to go to, I think, advanced. There you go. And then, here we go. Here's a bunch of things that look right. No. Yes. Let's go here. Multi-PHP INI editor. You're going to select your server, and right in here there should be an option for display errors.
Or open?
It's display errors, and we want it enabled.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to come down here and apply,
That's there?
and that should be there. Remember, we're managing hosting, not domains. Manage. Oh, so what are you? So you already saw your errors though, so you should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to check out.
So if you wanted to do it, you would probably do it from PHP version manager. Nope. Maybe from PHP variables manager. Nope. Oh, I don't know what these tools are. They don't look like they're doing anything. That's super weird. Well, it's probably one of those. I don't know what they're actually doing. You would probably need to look something up to figure out how that works. But there's your PHP MyAdmin stuff, which we're going to use later. What's up? No. Yes. So that, wait. Go back. So then, Is it this? Is it different? Is this? Yes, wow, that's very limited. Weird. They super limited what you're able to do. Yeah, you are. So I think it's the other one. I think it's the it's this one. It's the INI editor. So then you're going to choose your thing, and it's right here. Okay, so it went away. Weird. But it's not like. Oh, and then here. That's super weird. So you had to like. So that is weird. Like yours, it's like. Oh, here we go. 7.2 set as current. We're gonna try that. It shouldn't alter anything. with PHP before, but I don't think you've had a version set, which is super weird. Now, we should have a version set. Cool. Not PHP MyAdmin, don't need that yet. So, hey everybody, I need you to memorize how to get into your control panel, because later we're going to be getting in there a lot. The way to get into your control panel, you should all memorize how to do that. However you got into your control, that whole section of buttons and like softwares, that's where you all want to memorize how to get into. You all should be able to get into that very, very quickly so that you will be able to do things when we start working with our databases. So for right now, we should all be seeing errors. And what that means is you guys need to learn how to read the errors. Because you guys, if I have to come over to your thing and there's a line number and it has a very obvious solution and you're just not even looking at the line number, I'll be so mad. Oh, I'm going to be so mad. I mean, I'll help you, but I'll be mad about it. Okay? You guys, let's look at this. We can read this. We can read this. Okay, what do we have? We have a syntax error. That means we probably wrote something wrong. So it's not like our script broke. It's that we wrote something wrong. We wrote it wrong. So we either got the name wrong, or we're missing a semicolon, or something like that. Here we have an unexpected B. Okay, we have an unexpected B. Here's the first thing you need to know about errors. The error shows up at the first problem, not necessarily where the error is. So you guys need to start to recognize the kinds of errors there are. In this case, it's saying that there's an unexpected B. Does that mean that B is the problem? Almost certainly no. What that means is that something didn't finish before the B. And it came to B and was like, what the fuck is this B? Okay? So that basically means when you're reading an error, you want to read it enough so that you figure out where is not the error. Generally speaking, where is not the error is where the error happened. The error is usually before that, because in this case, something caused this thing to get to B and say, I don't know why I'm at B. Why am I at B? I shouldn't be at B. And this is what you all need to know. Semicolons are necessary at the end of lines in PHP. In JavaScript, they weren't necessary. There was a lot of code in JavaScript where you could leave off semicolons and it would be fine. But in PHP code, the semicolons are necessary at the end of lines. And so we must have them. Otherwise, it's confused. It doesn't know what to do. So, unexpected B in this code. Also, it tells you the file name, where the problem is, and the line number, where the problem is. And so that means you guys should be able to figure out where the problem is. So it's on learningphp.php on line 18. We go to line 18 and we can see that there's a problem with B, but that means that B is probably not the problem because I don't see any problems with B. And in this case, it's because I don't have semicolons at the end of these two lines. And now, I should see hello world again because there's no more problems. That B and that A aren't actually doing anything, but they shouldn't be giving me a problem either. They should just be fine. Now, you guys are notoriously bad at reading my code. And by you guys, I mean students. And so what we're going to do right now is I'm going to give you guys a tool. If you wouldn't mind right now, go all the way back. Actually, duplicate my URL right now. Duplicate the tab. So just right-click on the tab and duplicate it. And then I want you to go all the way back to my 608_1 folder. Okay? So duplicate the tab of my folder, and then go all the way back to the wnm608_1. Because you guys, if you've noticed, if you view my page source, you don't see my PHP code. Have you guys noticed that?
Yes.
Yeah. Has that been exciting so far? So, you can't see my source code. So I'm going to give you a tool to see my source code. This is actually very good for you, because what this means is that when you write PHP code, the user can't see it. It means you can write comments in PHP code that the user can't see, and it means you can do things on your server that the user doesn't know is happening. Now, it also probably doesn't affect the user until you show them something. So, if you go back to my wnm608 folder, you will see a new file in there called CodeView. You see that file? See a file called CodeView?
Yes.
Use that to browse to your Module 8 folder. Use that to browse to demo, and then use that to open up your learningphp.php file. And now, you can see my code. Okay? So you want to go back to the 608_1 folder, and there will be a code view file. You want to open that up, and then browse to Module 8, and then you will be able to open PHP files as you need to see the code of those files, which means that we can continue forward, and periodically you guys will be able to see my code by simply refreshing the code that I've uploaded. Okay? Which means that, once again, there's not a whole lot of excuse for you to get too far behind, but I want to remind you all to continue to try to type as we're going along so that you can practice your typing and practice typing faster and following faster and writing code better. Okay? Even though the code is still available to you, what it means is that periodically you can just catch up. Now, let us echo out A. A is a variable that has a value of 5. And when we echo A, what we should see is the number 5 on our screen. However, we've also echoed out hello world. How much space is there in the output between hello world and the number 5? 0. Do you want to know why that is? We haven't made any space. Unlike HTML, which always gives like one space in between elements, PHP, if you didn't make a space, it doesn't make a space. If you look in the code, if the output, there's no space. 0 space. Okay, so if we don't make a space, there is no space. And so when it comes to the idea of echoing and stuff like that, you guys should just know that there's only space if you've given it space. Okay? Let's talk about a very important concept called string interpolation. It's one of my favorite topics. The reason it's my favorite topic is because I love saying the word interpolation. It's a fun one. What is string interpolation? Well, string interpolation is something that means PHP variables can be expanded inside of strings without having to concatenate the strings together. Here's how that works. We're going to echo a div. Because it turns out we can write HTML inside of PHP strings. So we can just write HTML inside of this string. And we're going to say, I have a thing. I have 5 things. The variable A is interpolated to its value inside of the string. We don't have to do any crazy concatenating or plussing or anything like that. It just works. However, there's something important you need to know about PHP strings, and it's this. There is a difference between single quotes and double quotes in PHP. There was not really a difference between them in JavaScript, but there is a difference between them in PHP. Can you immediately tell the difference between these two things? What's the difference? What's the immediate difference on my screen?
The variable didn't
The
show.
dollar sign just looks like text now. If we save and refresh, you can see that now the variable has not been interpolated inside of a single string, which means that single strings do not interpolate values. Double strings do. What does this mean for you? It doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot except for stylistically how you might write code. For instance, if you are writing something that you think is like you're gonna maybe put a variable inside of, you just start with a double quote. It's a whole lot easier. Single quotes are something you can use whenever you're using one simple dumb string. And you know it's always going to be a dumb string, and it's never going to try to be a smart string. It's just going to be a dumb string. Like one word or something like that can be a single quote. But also, you guys, it's important to understand the idea of quotes and text. For instance, if we wanted to say, I've got, things, or I've got 5 things, right? Well, in this case, the double quote works just fine for this single quote here, which shows up in text all the fucking time, right? But if we try to put that here, it's fucked things up. And you guys need to start recognizing when your code is trying to tell you that things are wrong. For instance, your code is desperately trying to tell you it doesn't know what the fuck is going on anymore. Okay? And so when you see something like that, what you want to do is, okay, wrong, 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 wrong. Okay, this looks right. This looks right. So there's somewhere in here. That's the problem. And you need to figure out how to deal with that problem. One of the ways to deal with that problem is called escaping a character. Escaping characters is something that can be done with the backslash. The backslash character will escape a special character after it to make it not special. Sometimes the backslash is also used to make non-special characters special. So basically the backslash is used to oppositely special characters. So if something is special, it will make it not special. And if something is not special, it might make it special. You don't need to know too much right now, just that concept, okay? The backslash character is the escape character, and it can cancel out any of the specialness of certain characters. For instance, the single quote that is breaking the single quote string that it's inside. Hey guys. Say that word out loud. Everybody, right now.
String.
Do it one more time.
String.
Louder.
String.
Oh, thank you. How can you tell that something is a string visually? Visually in the code, how can you see a string? Quotes. Quote marks indicate a string. Repeat that. Quote marks indicate a string. Oh, thank you. I'm going to test you on that later, and I'm going to be so mad at everybody that fails. Just so we're all clear. Okay. You guys? Exit out of your PHP block and write an HR, and then write a div. It says, here's some other stuff. And then break back into PHP. And we're going to do this right now for no better reason than to teach you that you can. PHP is something that comes in blocks, and you can exit that block and just start writing HTML. The important thing that you need to know right now is that sometimes it can be useful to think in terms of PHP, sometimes it can be useful to think in terms of HTML. For instance, it wouldn't have done me a whole lot of good to echo this out, and I would have lost out on formatting if I had just echoed it out. The formatting of these spaces and line breaks and all that kind of stuff would be gone if I had just echoed out an HR and echoed out a div. By breaking out of PHP and just typing HTML, I can well, first of all, I get color highlighting, which I don't get inside strings. And I can just better, visually tell that I'm writing not PHP, just fucking writing HTML, okay? So what you guys should know is that you can break in and out of PHP at will, and you should be comfortable enough to do that. And we're going to do it throughout this document, which, by the way, this document is going to be hideous by the end of today, because this document is going to be a reference document for you. Hopefully you're taking really good notes. You might as well be taking a lot of notes just writing this document, okay? This document is something that we're going to just make look awful, but learn a lot of things inside of it, okay? So, here's some other stuff. Here we go. PHP is a loosely typed language. Now, loosely typed is a concept that does not mean typing. That's not typing on a keyboard. It's typing as in value type. So value types are a concept in programming languages. Let's list off some value types. Can anyone tell me a value type that we've learned right today? That I made you all repeat over and over again? A string! A string is a basic value type. Can anybody remember another basic value type that I've told you about so far? Something that had a literal value.
Variable.
The variable didn't have a literal value. The variable was assigned a literal value. What was the literal value type? What's the value type of 5? We're going to say number. It's a number. Numeric is probably a more fancy way of saying that. So numbers and strings are basic value types. Some more are a Boolean. Boolean is true and false. Boolean, B-O-O-L-E-A-N. Boolean. Say it with me. Boolean. Boolean. Say it again. Boolean. Boolean. It's a good word. I like that word. It means true or false. Okay? True or false values are Boolean values. They have a yes or a no, on, off, 0 or 1, true or false value. Okay? There's also arrays. There are also objects. Functions are even a value type in PHP as well. And so there are a bunch of value types. What's important for you to know is that PHP, being a loosely typed language, doesn't necessarily care from one minute to the next whether a variable has a value of a number or a string or an object. You can switch them around as you want. Now there is a way in PHP to strongly type your variables, but we're not going to learn about it. Okay? It's for better programs than we're going to make. So, what you need to know is that for the most part, PHP is a loosely typed language like JavaScript. JavaScript is also a loosely typed language. It doesn't necessarily care whether A is a 5 or a string. So, there are number types in PHP, but PHP doesn't care. For instance, oftentimes there's a thing called a float. So B might equal 0.333. That's a floating point number. Whereas there's also an integer. Integer might be something like B equals 15. And in that case, PHP doesn't care from 1 second to the next whether this is a floating point number or an integer number. It just cares that they're numbers. That's all it really cares about. They're numbers. Now at that point, we do have a string. So for instance, name equals your dude. Boolean equals is true equals true. Is true is a variable that we've set to a value of true. Is true describes its value, which is a good way to name variables. Now, at that point, let's talk about math. And let's talk about something called PEMDAS. Now, PEMDAS is something that we learn about in English when we're learning math. You might have learned a similar concept when you were learning high school math. So very, very basic math is when you might have learned about what's called order of operation. Order of operation is something that goes from parenthesis to exponent to multiplication to division to addition to subtraction. So PEMDAS stands for parenthesis, exponent, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. If you look this up on the internet, you can find out information about this. But basically, it's what's called the mathematical order of operation. If you put a multiplication to the right of a subtraction, the multiplication happens first, and then the subtraction happens after the multiplication. Because multiplication happens before subtraction. Okay? So this is called order of operation. You guys need to know it because it applies to programming. In programming, the same mathematical order applies. So multiplication maths will happen first, then divisions, then additions, then subtractions. But just like regular math, we can use parentheses to control the order of operation to make, for instance, the subtraction happen first and then the multiplication happen next. So, the way that tends to work is, for instance, if we echo out A plus B we should see, at the moment, 20. 15 plus 5 is 20. If we, however, say A minus B times 5, or times A, what's that value going to be? Well, we got 5 minus 15 times A is going to be what? So 15 times, with the numbers, I don't know. But in essence, what you should know is that it's going to be the multiplication first and then the subtraction. Okay? However, if we do parentheses, we can control the order of operation so that the subtraction happens first and then the multiplication happens. And that results in a different number. Questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the variable A and B, the number, you just random give them, right?
I gave them an A up here, B I applied 15 here, then down here I changed 15 to 0.333, and then I changed it back to 15 here.
Like the point 333, you just
I gave them arbitrary values.
Okay.
But the important thing is that B has the last value that was assigned to it, and the last value that was assigned to it was 15. So, let's talk about concatenation. Concatenation is my second favorite thing after interpolation. Interpolation is expanding values inside of strings. Concatenation is combining values together, usually string values together. So, if we echo a div, and then B plus A, and then dot, a closing div, what we have here is two string literals. This is literally a string, and this is literally a string. And at the moment, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but we're going to concatenate them together by using the period operator. What you need to know is that in JavaScript, the plus symbol was the concatenator. But in PHP, the period is the concatenator. And this is the first big thing that will fuck you up moving in between PHP and JavaScript, is that you'll do this wrong. You'll get used to using the pluses, and then you'll forget to do that in PHP. You'll get used to using dots, you'll do it wrong in JavaScript, okay? So you actually are gonna have to memorize this if you want to ever do both, and we will be doing both by the end of this semester, both JavaScript and PHP. And so what you need to know is that this is the first really big confusing part about these two, is the difference between concatenation and the period use in both JavaScript and PHP. And you guys just need to be aware of the differences between them. Is that in PHP, the period is concatenation, and the plus is addition. And in JavaScript, the plus is both addition and concatenation, and the period is object property notation. That's how the period works. Okay? So, if we concatenate equals C, B plus A equals C, and those will concatenate together in one string output. B plus A equals C. If at that point we want to, what we can do is we can echo out a div that says B plus A dot B plus A dot, oh wait, equals, forgot my equals, a closing div. Like this. Now, before I save and do anything, what do you think the output of this will look like? What will this look like when we run it? Someone guess. Please. Please. 220? So B plus A, so it's gonna be 20 equals 20? Is that what you're saying? What do you think?
$B plus $A is equal to 20.
That's what's gonna output?
I think so.
Okay, anybody else?
I will change 15 plus 5 equals 20.
15 plus 5 equals 20. Anybody else? Anybody else? Have another guess. You think it's going to say 15 plus 5? Votes for 15 plus 5 equals 20? Anything else? Anyone else have another guess?
那个句号在这儿什么意思啊？
Okay, let's find out. File save. Refresh. Ha! I don't think that worked right. I don't think that worked right at all, you guys. You guys, we are in the middle of one operation, and we tried to do a different operation here. What we've got here is a string that we then tried to concatenate. What just happened here is it was like, okay, I'll concatenate this string with that B. So we didn't actually change order of operation yet. All we did was say concatenate plus concatenate, which means order of operation states it's going to go concatenation plus so it's going to try and add B to this, and then, no, it's going to concatenate B with this, and then it's going to try to add A to this, and then it's going to try to concatenate this string with that string. But it can't add A to that string. That doesn't work. Unless we do an order of operation. And we put a parenthesis around this math. And that means this math will happen first. And then it will be able to concatenate that value into the two strings around it. Now, we should see 15 plus 5 equals 20. Okay?
have a question.
Pardon me, I'm receiving a phone call. Yes.
I'm not sure why my shoe is different than yours. Like I write like this, should be an arrow here, but mine is just a number here.
Well, shit. That might be a different version of PHP.
Yeah.
I know that PHP recently has been making moves to make things that would have normally thrown up errors throw up less and less errors. I do know that that's a move they've been making a lot in the most recent versions. So. Yeah, that's weird. Now it is ending with the 5 of the A. And if we look at the page source, it's done just 5 and then the closing div. So it's basically yours for some reason concatenated these together, tried to add these together, didn't give an error, but then just concatenated 5 with this, and that was all that it left up with. So either way, it failed. So yours failed in a different way, it just also failed. Okay? So if you now use the parentheses, you should get the correct output.
Alright.
These shoes have been giving me static electricity all day, so I'm having to be very careful when I touch anything and like expend my static electricity. Okay, you guys, we're going to have a test. Are you ready? Everybody, we're going to have a test right now. So, I want you to do this test with me. I'm going to write this out, and then I want you to do it. Okay? This is my name. And I'm going to do it right here. I'm going to type this all out and save it, and then you'll be able to copy this over into your code if you need to. But we want to make something that has a first name, a last name, a full name, and then echo full name. Right now, if I save and I refresh, I should get an error. And I want you all, are you ready? I want you to listen to me right now. Everybody listen to me, and then you can copy this into your thing if you want, or just keep typing it until you got it. I want you to assign a value of the string of your first name to the first name variable, and then assign a value of the string of your last name to the last name variable. And then I want you to assign a string to the full name that equals the first name concatenated with the last name. And that way, the echo full name should work correctly. Okay, so let me say that again. I want you to assign a string of your first name to the first name variable. I want you to assign a string of your last name to the last name variable. And then I want you to assign a string of the first name concatenated with the last name to the full name variable so that the echo full name variable will work correctly. Go. You're being tested. You have 5 minutes. So copy and paste it if you have to. Comment out everything else that you've been writing if you've got errors. You have 5 minutes to do this test. When you're done, I want you to just lean to the side and go. You do it too. No. 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 Oh. Now, yeah, the brand new ones? Cool, so you spent too much money on something that's not worth it. It's not. No headphones are worth $250. They're not worth it. No. No headphones are worth more than $150. And $150 is a stretch. That's a great question. Figure it out. Sorry, I've had this conversation with people all week long. I have had $30 Bluetooth headphones that were earbuds. Those sucked. I have had $80 headphones that were Bluetooth earbuds. They were okay. $150 was the best headphones I've ever had, but there's also zero reason to spend more money on than that because the best headphones I've ever had were at $150. And every other headphones on the market were at $150. Apple has just duped. I'm sorry, they have duped a whole series of people into paying way too much for a product that's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not. Now, it's worth it to you. The product is not worth that.
Of course not.
That's like saying anybody you can sell anything to anybody. That's why art is worth whatever somebody pays for it. But it's not worth it. And the fact that that's going to move the market in that direction toward $250, $300 headphones is fucking ridiculous. Headphones have been $10 for decades. For decades, $20 headphones were too much, and now people are spending $250 on headphones. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. I'm sorry. You guys, be discerning consumers. And I know you're an adult man, you don't need to be talked to like this. Too bad. All right, you guys. I feel like I made a whole big deal earlier today about the word string, and you guys repeating it to me, and how to indicate a string, and what a string looked like, and what a string was. I remember doing a whole, you guys had to repeat it to me. What does a string look like? What does a string look like? It's got quotes. Remember that? I made you say it out loud. Which means that if any of you went like this, you're wrong. Because it's got quotes. That's what a string is. Now, it might have actually worked. Because like I said, PHP has been making something that simplifies concepts if it works. But however, your full name would not have fucking worked at that point. So, you gotta have your last name and your first name. And at that point, you gotta have your full name. So you gotta have your first name, space, your last name. Oh, look at that. Just concatenate them together or interpolate them together. Either way it works. Now, I've interpolated them together with a space inside of them, inside of the string they're interpolating inside of. And so now, my full name should show up, just like this. That should not have been a 5-minute test. It should have been a 2-second test. That was the easiest test you'll ever take in your programming life. And all of you who forgot what a string looks like should all feel bad. And write down right now, I will not forget what a string looks like. I will not forget how to make strings. Strings are important, and I will remember how to make strings. Strings have quotation marks. That's what a string is. I love strings. Strings are the best. Please, Hamilton, give me more strings. That's what all of you should write right now. Now, some of you found different ways of adding the space in there. For instance, in my instructions, I told you to concatenate the strings together. I didn't, though, because there are many ways to do things. You could have concatenated these strings together. You could have interpolated them inside of a new string. Maybe one option is the better option. Maybe another is the better option. It kind of depends, right? Also, the process of concatenating these together with a space is actually a little weird because you would have to make a space right here, and it just looks weird. It looks like negative space. It looks like there should be a quote mark over here, but there's not. You're essentially making a space mark string. So there is a space character string right there. There's a string with only one space character. But it can look confusing the first time you do it. And so sometimes that's not the best option. Okay? But there are a number of ways to solve this problem. And hopefully you will remember one of them. And you will remember what strings are for the rest of the semester, which is coming right up. Let's take a break. Let's take a 15-minute break. And when we come back, more PHP. You're wonderful, just a You can justify it all you want. Fair. That's fair. I mean, honestly, if you have the money for it, buy it. That's the whole point, right? But it's one of those things where it frustrates me that they've moved the bar that far. That now that's the price that people are asking. Because it's way too much. It's way too much. The thing that you're essentially paying for there is the charging through the phone, but that's coming to all cases pretty soon anyways. And no other,
你听懂没？
no
他加
other
这个点点
device
干嘛？
are more than
哎，我一来也是这么写的，我一来也是跟他现在这样写的一样，后来发现他那个写法是更方便的。他就是说，string 就是你，就类似于是你把那个东西直接原封不动的，就把这个 quote mark 这个里面的东西原封不动的给它显示到它的这个网页上嘛。然后
Yeah, I
他
don't
加这个 quote
I don't
呢，就是
begrudge
意
anyone
思就是说
to
这个 quote 里面是一
use
个
their money to
space，
buy whatever
就
they
是
want.
空格。
哦，
然后
这里有
他的意思就是
个空格。
对。
I'm
他那
pissed
有个
about the
空
whole
格，
process.
哦，OK。
他的意思就是说是你把这个空格显示在这里。
哦，OK。
然后他这一句话的也就是说，first name。
Because they keep moving the bar.
哦，OK。
他是这个意思。
但是我
实际上你直接前后两个加一个 quote，把 first name 跟 last name
中间放一个空格也 OK。
包起来，然后中间加一个空格，也是能达到这个。
OK。
但是这样子写的话，比他那个写法要麻烦一点，所以他那个写法是最优。
这个是最优的。
对，这个是最优的。
这个前面它为什么要加个点点？
就是这个点的意思是在跟 JavaScript 里面的那个加号是一样的，就是这个 and 这个点的意思就是 and， 或者是 plus。其实他教的这个，你以后就可以用到你的那个表格里面。就是你购物的时候不是要填那个东西吗？他就让你加到这里。就别人过来给你填信息的填表格信息的时候，first name last name，然后你做那个表格后面不是要写一个 name 的嘛？然后那个 name 可以到后段的时候就反馈成这个东西。哦，
你又发炎了，你眼睛。
我感觉是那个玫瑰，叫做玫瑰什么东西来着？
是愉悦吗？还是擦脸什么？
玫瑰痤疮，对，一种东西叫玫瑰痤疮，就是因为太干，要么是激素不平衡，要么是心情烦躁，反正有各种原因，很有可能就是导致了你皮肤上的这种长玫瑰痤疮。
Hoodie if you need to, but then it just looks like a hoodie there. It's cool. I can see you're all really interested in my Scarf Time podcast. All right. So, back to PHP. Okay? Let's go down below this div, pop open a horizontal rule, and then break back into PHP. And let's talk about something called super global. we'll get into the concept of scope later and how variable scope inside of functions works. But there are a couple of variables that PHP makes for you, and we can actually find them on the internet by searching for, by going to like php.net, which is the PHP website, which all of you should have open basically every day you're working with PHP. Just like you should always just have Google and Stack Overflow open, you should just have php.net open whenever you're working with PHP. And we can come over here and we can search for okay, there it is, superglobals. Open up superglobals, and we get a concept with this list. Okay, it says that superglobals are predefined arrays of values, and you can see that there's a bunch of them. For instance, every variable you make in the global scope actually goes into a variable called globals, and it has access to all those variables, kind of like the window object of JavaScript. There's also a server, a get, a post, files, cookie, session, request, env. We probably won't use request and environment variables. We probably won't use files, cookies, or sessions this semester. But where have we heard get and post before? Where have we heard those two terms before? Heard them in jQuery? Anywhere else? Where have we heard get and post together before? Anybody remember? Forms. When making a form, and you're talking about the way that a form can submit, get and post are the two ways that form data can be submitted to a script. And what's important about that is that post is something that happens beneath the server in a secure way, and get is a way of submitting form data through the URLs that it is visible to the user. More importantly, get is something that doesn't require a form at all. Get just requires a change to the URL. So let's do this. Let's make an echo statement that echoes out a div. And inside of that div, let's echo out $_get, which is the get superglobal. And then let's try to access the name attribute of that array. Now, we're doing a couple of important things here. One, get is an array, which means that we're using array syntax to select the value of that array. Second, we're using a single quoted string inside of our double quoted string for a couple of reasons. One, this particular string right here is a stupid string, so using single quotes actually makes a lot of sense. It's not going to interpolate any variables inside of it. It's just letters. So using the single quotes means that PHP doesn't have to put any overhead into that string to try to interpolate it into a smarter string. It just knows that it's those letters. Whatever the letters are, that's what they are. Two, we're already inside of double quotes, so using single quotes means we don't have to like escape any characters or anything like that. We can just use it. However, this is probably, depending on your version of PHP, going to break. Let's save and refresh. And I get an error. This error is a lot harder to figure out than other errors we've seen. T encased, encapsed, and white space. Expecting dash or identifier or variable or number, unexpected white space or something. It doesn't know what's happening here. And the reason is because whenever we've interpolated a variable so far inside of our strings, it's been a simple variable, A, B, that's it. Turns out, this is a more complex variable selection. It's selecting a property of a variable. And so whenever we do this, we need to tell PHP where the start and end of our complex variable is. And we can do that with braces. If we put braces around our variable, it will now interpolate, hopefully, correctly. Now, it actually doesn't show anything right now. So let's just say my name is name. But it doesn't say anything. There's nothing there. And the reason is because get is an array that has all of the variables passed through the URL into this page. But we're not passing any variables into this URL right now. So let's do this. let's go and make a variable inside on the end of our URL that says name equals whatever. We're going to put something like this at the end of our URL. And so we're going to say question mark, whoops, name equals Hamilton.
What?
Name equals Georgie. So now we are able to change the URL and pass a variable into our script. This is our step into a much bigger world. And the bigger world is this. This page now has infinite content, because whatever somebody types in terms of the URL is now a different page output. And that means there is now infinite possibilities of content on this page, because we are taking dynamic content from the user. However, if the user provides no content, then it just sort of fails silently. Hopefully, you might get an error on certain versions of PHP, but hopefully this should just error out silently. So, this is exciting. This is good. It's also kind of stupid. This doesn't seem too terribly useful. So let's make a more useful version of this. Let's take this get name and let's duplicate this line. Let's highlight our divs right here, and let's put in a get type. And now, let's pass into our URL an and type. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to say that we want name something, type something. And at the moment, that doesn't do a whole lot. Unless you view the page source, and you'll see that now there's a something tag. Of course, HTML just interprets that as like a div, so it's not, or like a, I guess it's more like a span, so it's not a big deal. But let's try this. Let's change that type to H1. Let's change that type to text area. And any HTML element now. We are now creating a super dynamic page. The whole page is changing. The whole layout is changing based on the input from the URL. You don't seem impressed enough. Except him, he's enraptured. He's back there like, oh, that's the kind of reaction I need. It's the only way I thrive. Question. I'm quitting. What? You got error? Let's see. I'm going to blame you. Undefined index name. You didn't change the URL. So you are, like I said, there's a possibility that you'll error loudly. You errored loudly. So, nope. Question mark. Equals. Right. Now that one works, but this one is wrong. So now you need an and type. So now you need an and type. So and type equals. You guys, I wrote it right there. I wrote exactly what you have to do to your URL right there in the code. I just want to be clear. So if anyone else is having a problem typing that into your URL, just copy and paste that shit. All right? Copy and paste that to to the end of your URL and then change the name equals something to something else and the type equals something to something else.
Comments, right? So now why is it taking instead of URL?
What
Up
backslash?
till now we're using that double slash to comment, right?
Yes.
And now one
It is a comment. It's so that I can show you an example without having it break my code. Here, up here. Copy and paste something into the URL. Look, you guys! Oh my good sweet Lord. Everybody, stop. Everybody, stop. 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 Look at me. Everybody look at me. Sorry. I don't want you to have to look at that second. Everybody. In your URL, you want to go to the end of the URL and say question mark, name equals something, ampersand, type equals something. Look at your URL. Do you have that at the end of your URL? If you don't, welcome to Errortown. Okay? Also, don't bother putting this into responsive view. In your URL. In your URL. Put it in the URL. What's up?
Why do you have this one?
Yeah, it's because you didn't do the second one, so now you got to do and name or and type. And type equals h1.
Okay.
See, in the URL. In the URL. I feel like I did it in front of everybody, and I still got nobody did it right. Okay, I gotta move on. This is cool. Why would we do this? Well, we would probably not do this. But what's important is that we can now access data from the URL inside of our script, and that means we can make dynamic pages based on URL changes to the exact same file. The exact same file can now change its content based on a different URL to the same file. In other words, going to the same file, but just doing it a different way. It's like entering a house through the door, but then jumping in a window one day the next day. It's a different way of going in, same room, different glass on the ground. So, what we need to do is we need to keep going a little bit, and we're going to come back to this concept, okay? So for right now, what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and pop out of PHP and make another horizontal rule. And we're going to pop back in PHP, and we're going to talk about arrays. We're going to talk about data of arrays and objects right now, and how to select and use arrays and objects, which should be something that you've already learned how to do in JavaScript. We now have to figure out how to do in PHP. And so this is, most of today has been review, hopefully, except for the differences between PHP and JavaScript. So this should still be review. Let's talk about an array. Okay? An array is something that might be, for instance, colors equal an array. For instance, red, green, and blue. Arrays are useful when you want to store more than one value in one variable. Okay? So, for instance, calling these colors 1, colors 2, colors 3 might seem like a good idea, but it's better to just store them in an array of values and then access them, such as echoing out the colors with the array syntax for 0. Now, what color is going to show if I say color 0? Red is going to show. So if I say colors 2, what color is going to show?
Blue.
What does that mean? Well, that means that arrays are 0 indexed. And so that means that the third item is the second index. Okay? So, the index of each item in the array is numbered, starting at 0. So at that point, what we could do, and this is something interesting about PHP, is that we can actually write multi-line strings. This is something you can do. If you have a double quote, you can write a multi-line string. JavaScript doesn't quite let you do this with single or double quoted strings, but PHP lets you do it with double quoted strings. So here we can say break, and then colors 0. Now, I told you before that our previous thing was a little bit too complex. Turns out this should be fine and not too complex because there's not a string inside of a string inside of a string in this one. So it should work out just fine and not need any of the brace interpolation. But if we save and we refresh, we should see blue, red, green, blue, depending on what color you printed out up here. More importantly, you guys, with arrays, it is important to understand that the reason we use arrays is because we might not know how many colors we want, or in fact, the colors could be a changing amount. And in that case, in JavaScript, we were able to say array.length was a way of getting the amount of items in an array. But in PHP, we have the count. So we can say count colors. Count colors. And that should give us the count of colors. And that's how we deal with arrays. Now, let's talk about casting. Actually, wait, no, not casting yet. I lied. Let's talk about associative arrays. So, in JavaScript, there were arrays and objects. And objects were pretty much arrays that had string indexes. Okay? PHP actually has 3 different concepts. It has arrays, which are number indexed. It has associative arrays, which are string indexed arrays. And then it has objects, which are actually a whole different value type. Okay? So there's actually 3 different value types inside of PHP in terms of arrays and objects. So let's talk about an associative array. An associative array, in fact, let's just call this colors associative, can be written in the exact same way that a regular array can, but also, you guys, there is a shorthand, just like in JavaScript, where we can use the brackets to type out an array. So any array, associative or not, can be written out with the brackets instead of the array keyword. So this will make an array. What we're going to do here is we're going to say that this has a string index of red, and that the red property equals f00. And then we've got green, and blue, and we've got f00, and we've got 0 f0. Now, you can see here that in between our property and our value, we use what's called an equals arrow or a fat arrow. There's also a dash arrow or a thin arrow. Now, we can then echo out colors associative, and then use a string index such as red to print out pound f00. So red is the index in our colors associative, and it is printing out this value, F00. So at that point, what we can do is we can make a div. Inside of here, we can say this text is green. And if we save and we refresh, that text is not green. It's a lie. The text is a lie. But what we can do is we can change the style of this element to have a color. And at that point, what we can do is a quick PHP echo. I'm going to teach you how to do a quick PHP echo, because at the moment, if you look at my code, I am not in a PHP block. I'm in an HTML. I'm just in the HTML code of the document. So I'm going to do a tag that looks like this. It's got an equal symbol right here. And that means that if I put one value inside of this tag, it will echo out that value. So for instance, I can say colors associative green and echo that value out inside of my HTML code. So I'll save, and I'll refresh, and now the text is green. Now, if we look at this, we can see a couple of important things. One, I'm now able to switch between thinking in PHP mode and thinking in HTML mode, and still use PHP variables inside of HTML mode, right? There's no such thing as HTML mode, we're just calling it that. We're thinking in HTML, right? And I can pop a PHP variable into that mode if I want. More importantly, you might notice that there's no semicolon. We made a big deal earlier that said semicolons need to be used. But what I said was semicolons need to be used between statements. And what that means, this is actually kind of similar to CSS. Semicolons need to go between CSS properties and between PHP statements. And that means that the last statement doesn't need the semicolon. You guys actually want to get in a good habit of using semicolons all the time, but it turns out you can leave them off when it's the only statement in the block. Okay? If it's the only statement in the block, you can leave off the semicolon and it will still work. So, back to PHP. Now let's talk about casting. So, casting is a concept in programming that means changing a value from one type to another type. Most casting is pretty simple. For instance, if I say C equals a string of A, that means I'm getting the value of A, which is 5, but it's actually going to be a string of A, which is not the same thing as the number 5. The string of 5 is not the same thing as the number 5. And so I'm actually casting it to a string. There's a lot of easy ways to cast the other direction as well. For instance, taking C times 1 will attempt to convert a string into a number. But it will make it times 1, which is the exact same number. So it won't change the number at all. This is a quick way of casting from a string back to a number. Casting other things can be a little bit more complicated. There are a lot of ways to cast, but one of the things we want to know how to do is to cast an array to an object. And in that case, what we can do is we can say that there is a colors object that equals an object of the colors associative. And this is a way that we can cast from an associative array to an actual PHP object. And earlier I said that PHP objects are different than PHP arrays and PHP associative arrays. PHP arrays are number indexed. PHP associative arrays are string indexed. And PHP objects are a much more complicated thing. Why would we want one versus the other? Reasons that I'm not going to go into in this class, but reasons. Now, if we echo out colors right now, what happens? It says array. Thanks, PHP. Super useful. Yes, colors is an array. It doesn't tell me what's in the array, but it tells me it's an array. If we try to go to print out colors associative, it's also an array. And if we try to print out colors object, I get, well, this is interesting, you guys, because I didn't get the whole script broken. I just sort of got a warning. So this didn't like error out the whole script. It just gave me a warning right here, and it was like, hey man, I don't know. No. And it's basically saying that object of class standard class could not be converted to string. So we cannot simply echo out complicated data. What can we do? Well, we'll deal with echoing out more complex data in a minute, but for right now, we need to talk about different notations. And we just basically need to make a list for ourselves. So we're going to do array index notation. Okay? Array index notation looks like this. We're going to echo out our colors, 0, and then we're going to add on a break. We're going to then say that we want our colors associative, and that's going to be red. And these are the two ways that we can get our arrays to print out their values, with a string for the index or with a number for the index of a regular array. Okay, so this is the array, this is the associative array. Now, interestingly enough, you guys, since the value of color 0 is actually the word red, that means we can actually use color 0 to select an index inside of the colors associative. Because the value of color 0 is the string red, and the index of colors associative is the string red. So it prints it out again. Interesting. Let's talk about object property notation. Okay, so objects are a different thing that I've been talking about. And the way we can access object values is with colors object and a dash arrow or a thin arrow. And then the name of the property that we want. So in PHP, or in JavaScript, this would have been something like this. Colors object dot red. But in PHP, we do it like this. Colors object dash arrow red. Interestingly enough, since that property is also it's technically a string of red, we can actually use braces right here and use colors 0 to select the red property of the colors object. Now some of you might be thinking to yourself, why? Hamilton, why? Why are we learning all of this? Well, we're learning all of this and writing all of this, and hopefully you all are writing along, because this is a reference file. This file is a reference file for you to refer to for the rest of the semester, okay? You can find other reference materials online and all that kind of stuff, but these are the things that we really, really, really need to know for this semester. All of this stuff you guys need to know and have memorized for this semester in order to not just feel hopelessly and completely lost. You guys all need to memorize and learn all of the stuff in this document, which is not that fucking much. Okay? So, at this point, if we want to print out our whole array, there is an option for that, and it is called print R, or print human readable. Print R as a PHP function can print out an array, or an object, or some other complex data. And what you'll notice is that it can also do this for other things. So for instance, we can print out colors, and then we can print out colors associative. However, you'll notice that this is basically unformatted, but if we actually look in the page source, PHP has formatted it in our HTML. It's just not formatted in an HTML format. It's formatted in the text of the HTML document, but it's unformatted in HTML because HTML doesn't format text. But HTML does have an option for formatting text, and it works like this. We're going to take these two things right here, and we're going to say that we want to echo our colors object, and we want to echo out a pre-tag, and then comma our print R, and then comma a closing pre-tag, like this. Pre is a pre-formatted HTML tag, which means that you can do cool poetry like E.E. Cummings used to do on a typewriter. We can save and refresh. Now it keeps the formatting of the text in the HTML and keeps that formatting for this. It also adds this one right here, and to this day I have no fucking clue why. Don't ask me, I don't know what that one is. I don't. So it turns out, you guys, that this might be a much better way of showing information than the print R is. So let's make our first function. We've used functions. Print R is a function. Let's make a new function. We're going to make a new function, and we're going to call it print P. And we're going to copy and paste our echo pre thing right here, this whole line. We're going to copy and paste that into our print P. We're going to say that print P is a function that expects some value, and that that value is what we're going to print R with pre-tags around it. By the way, print P is arbitrary, but it means print pretty. As it means print pretty. And so from there, what we can do is we can say print P colors. Or better yet, let's do print P get. Remember that get object that we passed a bunch of values into? Save that, refresh. Now we print P our get. We can see that there's a name and a type in our get.
What PHP has.
Print R is something that PHP has, and we have now extended that with our own function called print P. We just made it up. How you guys doing? Feeling good? Feeling strong? Do you like PHP? We haven't even got started yet. This is day one. This is review. This is review, you guys. Luckily, you now have this whole file for review. Hopefully you've been taking great notes. Hopefully you've been paying attention. Hopefully there's a recording that someone will share with you. So, this is our review helper file. It doesn't look pretty, but it's got a whole lot of examples. And all of this stuff is going to be necessary for you to not feel like you're totally lost this semester. So all of you really want to take the effort to really learn how this works. Okay? You want to go back over this stuff. You want to go back through these notes. If you need to learn more, go onto the internet and say, string interpolation, PHP, what is that? Or better yet, always start with the language and then the problem. So PHP, string interpolation, how to why. Okay? But there's a lot of notes in here. There's a lot of stuff to look over. A lot of it's review. You guys should feel like this is review from JavaScript. But there's new stuff too. Okay? A lot of the new stuff is really just different stuff. The ways that PHP is different than JavaScript. So, at this point, you guys, this has all been reviewed. Now, we need to do something that actually feels useful. We need to do something useful? Useful? Let's make a new file. Let's call this file product_list.php. Product_list.php. Let's open that file up as well. So product_list.php. Let's make that an HTML5 page. Let's say product list. Let's give it a meta VP. Let's go to one of our other codes and just bring in our CSS for right now. No JavaScript, just CSS. Just bring in our comment, our grid, and our theme. Let's make a header. .navbar if you have one. Make an H1. No, make a container with an H1. It says product list. Let's make a container after that. And inside of there, let's put a card. And then inside of there, let's make an H2 that says products. Actually, let's call this product site. And this is product. And inside of there, let's make a UL that is, oh, what did I call this? I called this something, didn't I? I made something in here. Did I not? I'm going to make a class in my navs that's called collapsed, which is basically a class for a nav UL, but it's the exact same thing as a nav UL, so I'm going to make a class called collapsed right here. And then back in here, I'm going to make a UL that is collapsed, and then inside of that, I'm going to make an LI that says product 1, 2, 3, 4. Save, refresh. Look how easy it is to make a website when you have the tools and you understand how they work. We have so much work that just got done because we just know how these tools work. We don't have to make this over and over again every single time. We've got a concept for how our site works, and we can build a new site from scratch very, very fast. Now, our sites have a theme to them, but that's okay. That's fine for most websites. Most websites don't need to look 100% different. In fact, most websites these days look the same. Okay, so we got some navigation, right? Let's make a second page. But before we do that, what was the most frustrating part about working on your midterm? What was the most frustrating part about working on your midterm? Anybody, raise your hand, tell me. What was the worst part about working on your midterm? Yes?
Structure.
Structure? Anybody else?
Sometimes we should repeat something.
Repeat something constantly? That sucks. Anybody else? Did you love every part of making your midterm? Mm-hmm. Do you remember anything that was particularly sucked? Layout? Yeah. Anybody else?
Table. Form.
Tables?
Yeah.
Tables and forms? Those are weird. You know what I hate? Having to design something on 10 pages And then if you change it on one of them, you have to change it on 10 different pages. So today we're going to learn something that if you do this, if you learn this, you can walk away from this class successful because you actually learned something useful. Okay? You can go make every website you ever want to learn if you just learn this. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this header off. Just pull it right off of our site. We're going to make a new file. We're going to paste just the header into this file. Okay? Just the header, no other HTML at all. Okay? We're going to save this into a new folder called parts. And we're going to call this, actually we're going to call it header.html. And the reason for that is because this isn't really a PHP file. It doesn't actually matter right now. We're just going to do it for like visual reasons. We're going to call it HTML, header.html. We're going to come back to our product list, and we're going to say that we want to PHP include our parts/header.html. Now, I'm going to save this document as my product list. I'm going to save it as, and I'm going to save as product item.php. So I'll now have a product list.php and a product item.php. And if you guys need to see what my files look like, don't forget about my browser, the code view. Because with the code view, you can now see all of my files and be able to see all of my files and browse all of my PHP. Okay? So you guys should be able to browse all of my PHP. So I've just duplicated the product list and made it product item. It still includes the header, and so it still works. So let's go back to the header right now. Let's remember some of the stuff that we did inside of the header. So we've got header, container. We're going to make this a flex parent. And then we're going to make this one be a flex child. And then we're going to make this one be a nav.navFlex with a UL with an li times 3 greater than a with an href hashtag and a link $. And I'll also make this a flex none. There we go. Cool. Remember how to make a nav bar? Remember how to make links? It's actually super easy. What's cool is now we have a header in both places, which means that if I were to make a link that went to product list, and I was to call that shop, and I was to make a page that went to product item.php, and this one was called item, then if I had my product item and it said shop item, shop item, my header is updated in both files because it's only made once. The header is only created one time. It's just shared between the two pages. So, if you're just sitting back and looking, you should probably be having my code open, looking at the code as I'm writing it and saving it, just so that you can be analyzing what's going on as it's happening, right? We now have a product item.php that also includes a header, And we now have a product list.php that also includes a header. Hey guys, is there anything else on these two pages that is exactly the same? Anything else? Any other thing? It's basically the exact same thing. Anything else? On these two pages? Is there anything else that's basically the exact same thing? The head content, right? Now, this is an interesting concept because this is where this becomes a little bit of an art form, is the idea of what is a good idea to separate off into a separate part file, and what's not a good idea to separate off into a separate part file. For instance, I think that it's possibly, like right now this says product list. I don't think it should necessarily say that on the product item page. I think we should call this one product site list. And then we should call this one product site item. And they have two very different titles, right? But kind of the rest of this head is the same. And so I think we could offload that onto a separate part file so that if we ever wanted to add new CSS or change the location of our CSS, we could do it across our entire site. In that case, what we might want to do is just pull, for instance, this, make a new file, and call this in our parts folder head files or head.php or head.html or something that means something to you. Okay? Now, this can sometimes get confusing when we have a part called head and a part called header, but I don't think it's any more confusing than head and header and heading already are in HTML. Okay? So we have a header section and we have our head content. And now we can share the same head content between all of our documents. What that means is that if I come back in here, I can copy this and I can paste this here and I can include my head.html into the head. And then I can include that here as well. And what that means is that now, if, for instance, I wanted to look back into the code that I had written previously and notice that there was some JavaScript in there, for instance, loading in jQuery, I could perhaps go into my head.html, load jQuery into my project, and now jQuery would show up on all of my documents as a source. But my documents can all still have a unique title because the title wasn't pulled over into that head part because the titles are, generally speaking, different. Questions? Any questions right now? Okay. So, why are we doing this? Well, if for no better reason than it was super frustrating to have to change something on 5 different files. It was very frustrating if any of you ever had to run into that. How many of you ran into that while making your midterm? I would expect everybody's hand to go up. Unless you just figured out your header right away and you were done. You made no changes to a header, right? At some point, you had to copy and paste that over to a bunch of different pages. It was frustrating. Now, by the way, some of your pages might have different headers. So for instance, this is perhaps a header main or something like that, right? This can still be pulled down. But if you do a different header for each one, well, then I think you've lost the point. Right? This is for a duplicated header that's shown on a number of different pages together. So, let's take this one step further. Let's come back to our product list page. And let's make a couple of anchors to our products inside here. And let's make them all go to product item.php. Okay? We're going to make all of our product links inside of this page. The links that go to product item. And then what we're going to do is we're going to append onto each of them question mark ID equals 1, 2, 3, 4. So now when we click these links, we go to product item ID equals 1. What's going on? Or product item ID equals 3. So if we go back to our product item now, and we come in here, we can say product item number PHP, but we'll do that quick PHP, and we'll say get ID. Now do you see why we do it? I was getting around to it. So, we are now able to make a page that links to one, like a whole bunch of different links that all go to one file, but all tell that file to be a different or show different information. And all we have to do is make the link different, and then on that page show different content. So for instance, right now this is working just fine, right? But let's do some basic program. Let's do some really basic programming right here, and let's start some PHP inside of our section right here. And let's make this actually just be an echo. So we're going to change this into an echo right now, okay? This whole thing right here is now one big echo. But we're going to do some logical programming. Logical programming involves an if. Ifs are where we can do logic, and you guys should remember this stuff from JavaScript, right? If is how we can do logical programming. With this, we're going to make one thing that does one thing. And if it does it, we'll show this. And if it doesn't, we'll show something else. If it doesn't, what we'll show is a div that says no item selected. So, what we're going to say is if is set get ID. This is a PHP function called isSet. Checks to see if a variable has been set to a value, or if it exists in essence, right? If it exists and it has a value, then it's set. So if the get ID has been set, we will show it product item number ID. Which means that right now, nothing changes. Unless you come to this page inappropriately by typing the URL wrong. Now it says no item selected. And by the way, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but probably in your header right now you should remove these other two links because they are not really appropriate anymore. We have just the shop. I mean, if anything, we could probably switch these up to something like about and cart. There we go. That makes more sense. Shop. All of our products link to appropriate product items. But now, inside of our other PHP page, if there is an appropriate ID, we show that product. If there's not, we show something else. That's logic. That's programming. That's the way that works. Hooray! And now we have a dynamic website. How many products can we show in this website? all of them. Infinite. We can show infinite products in this web. 12. We can show infinite products in this website because all we have to do is make a new link and hopefully have something to show there. At the moment, this website is built pretty simple, but it works. So, guess what your assignment is this week? I want you to do a couple of things. Thing number 1. Copy over your midterm and put it in the Module 8 folder. Take all of your HTML files and rename them to .php. Take all of your HTML files for the midterm and rename them to .php. And then you're going to need to immediately go into all of your PHP files and change all of your links, which are currently pointing at .html files. Change your links to the .php links. Okay? So any link that was linking to an HTML file will now be linking to a .php file. So you need to change all of your files to .php, then change all of your links to match those new file names, .php. And then I want you to look through your documents and find the parts of your site. Here are some good possible parts. Are you ready? Header. Seems like that's probably shared across a number of pages. Head content, probably shared across most of your pages. Footer. Is footer shared? Maybe footer is shared. Maybe some things aren't shared across everything. So for instance, do you have a similar structure for a suggested products? Do you have a similar section in your site for like, here are some suggested products, and you have one like on the main page and one on like the product item page, or like a couple of them somewhere? If you have something like that, then you can break that off into a part for right now. And then you can include it into the pages that need it. Did you make some other content that could be broken up and moved into a part? Hey, by the way, try to figure out what, like I said with the head, right? Try to figure out what's appropriate to break off into a part and what's not appropriate to break off into a part. And by the way, I know you saw me cut and then paste, but that's because I know what I'm fucking doing. I highly suggest that you copy and comment out before you delete anything, okay? Copy and comment out before you delete anything, just in case you mess things up. Your assignment this week is to PHPify your whole midterm, and then start to pull the parts of your site out of your pages. Move them into part HTML files inside of your parts folder. And then also, you still have a fucking final to make, so keep working on that. This is probably going to break some things, so you need to test all of your links. Do some test-driven programming this week, all right? Make sure that you test all of your links. Make sure that everything works. If any of you had any product lists that didn't link to all of your products, don't bother with that right now. But, you know, make sure that all of your links work. Make sure that everything's working. Make sure your JavaScript still works. Maybe it should, but make sure it does. Okay? Make sure it's not broken on any other pages. Make sure that if there's some code that needs to be on a page, then it's not a part. If there's some code that can be on all pages, then make it a part. Questions? Hey everybody. It just gets harder. It doesn't get easier. If you're not in a study group, helping out with coding so far, you need to get in a study group if you think you need to. Okay? And if today you thought this was hard, this was not the hard programming day. This was review. So if you need to get in a study group, get in a study group. Do not rely on the videos of this lesson. Don't rely on the videos of other people online. Rely on each other. Help each other out. Okay? And make sure sure that you are actually keeping ahead. Do not let yourself get 2 weeks behind at this point. Okay? Keep up with the assignments. Keep up with adding the work that we do in class into your projects when it's appropriate. Or, when we don't have an assignment that gets added into your project, make sure you're still working on your project. Make sure you are still updating it, improving it, fixing it. Do not get behind this semester. It is very hard to climb out of getting behind in this class. But also, have fun. PHP is great. It's awesome. Programming is hard. PHP is great. And every once in a while, when you get frustrated with your or with your now final project, switch over to working on your portfolio, which you should all be working on. I know it's not an assignment in any class yet, but fuck it, don't wait. Work on your portfolio. Start trying to see if you can make a portfolio with the PHP you know so far. Try it. You actually definitely will not learn You definitely will not learn PHP if the only project you make this whole semester is the one you turn in. That's it, we're good.